Hello, my name is Alma Robinson, and I am the Executive Director of California Lawyers for the Arts. CLA is a statewide nonprofit organization that was founded in 1974 to serve artists and arts organizations of all disciplines with advocacy as well as services that provide support with legal and business issues. With staffed offices in San Francisco, Berkeley, Sacramento, Los Angeles, and San Diego, we provide several core services. First, we provide legal counseling to specialized attorneys who provide assistance with a variety of intellectual property questions, as well as contract reviews and negotiations, and other important business issues. Depending on the client's financial status, legal assistance may be available on a pro bono or reduced fee basis. We also provide a specialized program that assists independent inventors and small startups with their patent applications. To help with situations involving disputes, we provide a range of alternative services, including negotiations counseling, mediation, and arbitration that can avoid the expense and hassle of going to court. Finally, we offer a full menu of educational programs that include workshops, symposia, and conferences on various legal topics for artists and arts organizations. Many of these programs are posted on our YouTube channel, and we encourage you to use these tools to educate yourself on the legal issues before you reach out for specialized assistance from our organization. Thank you for joining today's program, and please consider joining CLA on our website at www.calawyersforthearts.org so that we can continue to maintain our full range of services. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining California Lawyers for the Arts for Intersections, Art and Law at the Border, our second annual symposium. My name is Diana Cervera, and I am the program manager for California Lawyers for the Arts San Diego. And I'm joined today by our special projects coordinator, Sara Gonzalez, who co-led this project and helped make tonight's event possible. Also on the call are members of our statewide staff, including Alma Robinson, our executive director, and Gloria Ruiz Oster, our newly appointed Southern California director. Before we begin tonight's program, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that the land we are on is native land. The border region of San Diego, Tijuana, is the ancestral territory and homeland of the Kumeyaay Nation, past, present, and future. We recognize that we are guests in the Kumeyaay's homeland, and as guests, I extend my respects and gratitude to the many indigenous peoples who still reside here and call these lands their home. We're going to share some words from Jonathan Glass, who is the president for the San Diego Commission for Arts and Culture.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Glass. I'm the Executive Director of the Commission for Arts and Culture for the City of San Diego. I'd like to welcome you to this second annual Art and Law at the Border Symposium. On behalf of the Commission, I'd like to thank California Lawyers for the Arts for their partnership, their leadership, and for producing this important event. I'll be attending along with you and look forward to virtually meeting you in the coming days. Welcome to the conversation.
The US-Mexico border has been described as an arbitrary divide, an open wound, delineating the meeting of nation states and defining that which is inside and that which is left out. Characterized by a constant tempering and transmutation, a border region is a delicate and complex ecosystem fraught with the push and pull of political attitudes, global debates on migration, and intricate networks of power. Tonight is the last webinar in our symposium series. And I want to thank you all for joining us. I know that there are some of you who joined us last year, and although COVID-19 did not allow us to convene in person this year, it is still very important to us that this conversation continues beyond today. In the backdrop of this pandemic, we're living in a unique political moment in time that includes this region and this border in an important and palpable way. This symposium was created with the intention to really include and prioritize the work and experiences of those most impacted by what a border represents. For those of us who live and work on both sides of the border, for those who are undocumented, for migrants and refugees arriving at the port of entry at this very moment from Haiti, Central America, Cameroon, and beyond, for families currently held in detention only a few miles from where I sit, for those who are creating art in response to that which is no longer ignorable, to the humanitarian aid workers and activists, to the immigration attorneys, to all those involved in translating and expressing what a border region is and what a border does. I want to thank you for all of your insight and your work, for your dedication to this community and this ecosystem rooted in a vision for change, in a different way of relating to one another. It is my hope that each year this event will be able to expand its audience and diversity of perspectives. And I really want to urge all of you to stay connected to us beyond this conversation and beyond today. We've had the honor of featuring many amazing speakers from the different sectors that I just named, from the different perspectives and vantage points, but California Lawyers for the Arts is really interested in continuing to serve this binational region. So with that, I want to invite you all to please stay connected with us beyond this symposium. We do offer a variety of legal services across the state for things like contracts, especially right now under COVID-19, there's things like housing coming up for folks. So if there's a question, something that you need support on or clarification on, please really visit our website, reach out to us so we can see what support we can offer. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce our panel and tonight's speakers. So I'll hand it over to Sara to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Diana. So tonight we will be featuring two nonprofit organizations working in the Tijuana, San Diego area. First, we have Espacio Migrante. It's a binational nonprofit organization that works in the area of Tijuana and San Diego, focusing on supporting migrants, refugees, and deportees. The organization works directly with diverse migrant communities, including migrants from Haiti, Central America, and other regions of Mexico, migrants of the LGBTQ community, women, and youth. Espacio Migrante mainly focuses in the following areas: education, human rights, cultural exchange, orientation and social work, community organization, and advocacy. On this call, we also have American Friends Service Committee from the U.S.-Mexico Border Program. They advance human rights and self-determination of migrant communities through base building, alliance building, documentation, and policy impact, using a human rights framework and in collaboration with community partners. AFSC advances policies affecting immigration and border issues and builds alliances to protect migrants and non-migrant rights.
Thank you, Sara. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Vanessa Cesenia. And Vanessa Cesenia is the Human Rights Program Associate for AFSC's U.S.-Mexico Border Program, where she focuses on documenting human and civil rights violations in the border region. She received her bachelor's degree from the University of California, Los Angeles, and her master's degree in social work from the University of Southern California. Her focus has been on immigration issues affecting vulnerable populations in the border region. Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you, Diana and Sara, for the introduction and the invitation. And thank you to everybody that's tuning in this evening to continue learning about border work and border life. And I want to start off by sharing a bit about myself. I'm from the Tijuana-San Diego border region, specifically from San Isidro, and I am a first-generation daughter of Mexican immigrants. And while my academic experiences have provided me with the tools, so to speak, to be an effective macro social worker, it is the unique experiences that come from growing up binational, bicultural, bilingual, that have really helped me understand the lived experiences of the migrants, immigrants, and refugees that I have met and supported in my 10 plus years doing this work in various capacities. And as Diana mentioned, I'm the Human Rights Program Associate at AFSC, and AFSC is a nonprofit that has been advocating for peace and justice for the last 100 years. And the US-Mexico Border Program in particular has been documenting civil and human rights violations in our border region since the 1970s. And at that time, a lot of the cases that were being recorded by the staff have to do with the excessive use of force by law enforcement, including Border Patrol. And many people, predominantly Mexican nationals, were badly beaten by agents during arrests or apprehensions. And I share this to illustrate the complex relationship border residents have had with border agents and with other immigration officials, and also to start to draw some of the parallels. We are seeing, right, a lot of this kind of being replicated during the last few months during this pandemic, but we have also seen this excessive use of force and the mistreatment of just people in general, right, in the border region for many, many, many years. And our San Diego program does focus on policy impact and advocacy at the local and state and national levels, on base building and alliance building, and on documenting the experiences of people that come in contact with immigration officials, whether that's while they are crossing the San Isidro port of entry or when ICE stops them on the streets. This is essentially the bulk of our work. So I want to share this African proverb that captures the essence and the importance of documentation. And it's on the screen. It says, "Until the lions have their own historians, the stories of the greatest hunts will always glorify the hunter." And this speaks to who gets to tell their truth, how that truth shapes reality, and in turn, how we respond to that reality. And it makes us think about who gets to tell the story and how and why we assign truth to only some versions of a story and not others. So when we think about storytelling, journalism, and documentation work, we must also stop and analyze the structural inequities, the systemic corruption, the racism, and so forth and so on that impact all of this work, because all of those realities impact how stories are digested by the readers, by policymakers that are reading these testimonies or whatnot. And it really impacts how the stories in themselves can be used to shift these systems that we are fighting against, right? So in essence, documentation is a storytelling tool that we and many others use to defend the basic human dignity of our community members. And during the last few years, we have seen significant changes in migration trends, as well as major policy changes. And here on the screen, right, on these last two slides, it's just a very, very small snapshot of the changes that we have been experiencing and living through here in the border region. So here we see kind of a rough timeline of these shifts in population trends of migrants and refugees. And then here we have on this screen just a really, again, very, very brief timeline of the major changes in immigration policies that we have seen in like the last year and a half. I did not put on there anything that happened on 2020 because I think we're all still kind of processing all of that, and it's very traumatizing, right, for a lot of us and for the people that we are supporting. So to say the least, there's been a lot going on. And our region, to top it off, falls within the 100-mile enforcement zone. So our work, my work, and the work of many other grassroots and local nonprofits that work on similar issues, we all deal with ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We're dealing with Border Patrol, with customs officers, which are at the ports of entry and at the airports. And we're also dealing with Federal Protective Services, which is essentially the Department of Homeland Security's police, right? So all of these different branches they all fall under the Department of Homeland Security. So because we're interacting with so many different enforcement agencies, and because, as you see, the 100-mile border enforcement zone covers our county, we end up getting a lot of different calls from various community members that have had some sort of negative experience with one of these agencies. And what we do on the documentation side is that we conduct an interview with the impacted person and their family if they are open to having the family present. So we spend a good amount of time building relationship, getting to know them, building that trust, and getting as many details as possible. We ask them to describe what the officers said, how many officers were present during the interactions, the tone of voice that they used, any other nonverbal communication, the uniform that they were wearing, and other minute details. But most importantly, we asked them to share with us how they felt. And we asked them to try to, decipher and explain, what the psychological and emotional impact of the encounter was. Because it's not just about the end result of the incident, meaning whether the person was detained or released, but it's about the process, right? It's about the entire interaction that this person had with this immigration official and how that person's life was altered by this one incident. And what we have found time and time again is that people, and this includes men and women, children, US citizens, permanent residents, and those that are undocumented, they're deeply impacted and traumatized by how they're treated by immigration officials. And we constantly hear that immigration officials are using racial slurs against people. They cuss at them. They place them in different holding cells that maybe don't have cameras, so whatever it is that they're doing doesn't get documented or tracked by their systems. So essentially, immigration officers will do anything to strike fear in these people. It's a form of psychological warfare, we could say, and that's very, very traumatizing and concerning. And on top of all of that, right, the biggest issue is that there's a lack of accountability when it comes to the actions of these officers across the board. And documenting these incidents is one way that we can work towards bringing long-term community-driven change. So after gathering all of the details that we get from these interviews and interactions with those impacted, we may move forward with filing a complaint to the federal government, which would be to the Office of the Inspector General, the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Office of the Department of Homeland Security, or directly to the agency and the section chief or director. We do leave it up to the impacted person to decide if they want to go down that complaint route, because the complaint forms, as many of you guys may know, do require us to provide a lot of identifying information, and we want to make sure that the family or the person feels very comfortable doing that. So we definitely guided them through that process and explained all the pros and the cons maybe. And at times we may reach out to elected officials to let them know what their constituency is going through, and especially if any of these enforcement interactions happen somewhere in San Diego County, we definitely reach out to the council members or whoever it is that's representing that area. So this entire process, everything that you all see on the screen, is definitely done alongside the person that was directly impacted. And we let the people drive kind of like the court, almost like the advocacy course that they want to take for their specific case. And when we start compiling violations, we, may start noticing trends. Oftentimes we do write reports that critically analyze the incident and that counter maybe the official narrative. And we compare the actions of the agency or the officers involved to that specific agency's internal policies and to Homeland Security guidelines. And being able to combine both storytelling and policy helps this work become a very powerful advocacy tool. And we also use earned media as a way to project and amplify the stories that we want told and that the community wants told. And for those that do feel comfortable doing media interviews, we help prepare them to conduct those interviews themselves and are there to provide them with as much support as possible. And we do encourage folks to do media interviews themselves because there's so much more strength in stories being told in their own voices versus it being somebody from our staff or from our office, for example. And storytelling, whether used for advocacy or not, must be ethical and needs to respect the wishes of those that are directly affected. We do not provide any identifying information, any details about the incident, or any audio or videos that we may have without first having the consent of the directly impacted people. And now I kind of want to go through some very specific examples of how we have documented some of these shifts in policy, the shifts in migration trends that have taken place in our region. And I mean, all of this, I'm a huge empath, so all of this is really heartbreaking to say the least. And I will say that because we really kind of meet the people where they're at, and we really strive on like making sure we're genuinely accompanying people through this. That sometimes it makes the work a little bit more emotionally taxing. And I'm saying that right now, kind of putting myself out there and being vulnerable, because I think oftentimes us as advocates, we don't kind of share that this work and these stories, do touch us also in that way. So as everybody here knows, the influx of migrants, many of who are asylum seekers, all of those, the patterns really changed during the last few years. And for me personally, and professionally, it caused me to shift the focus of my work from looking at experiences of, I'll say, regular border crossers, which could mean somebody that has a border crossing card or a green card or a US passport or maybe a tourist visa, right? So shifting the focus from looking almost, more specifically at those interactions to looking at how those that were arriving at our southern border were being treated. And our office made various visits to shelters in Tijuana and in Mexicali to be able to, actually interact with folks and meet them and kind of hear from their own perspective, what was going on, what their experiences had been during the journey and whatnot. So here are some pictures that some of our staff, we used to have a AFSC staff person in Tijuana, so she took some of these as well. And now I bring you to this, almost iconic is the wrong word, but that's the word that came to mind right now, this picture of this woman grabbing her children and running. We saw this picture, all over social media and the news or whatnot. So this was in November 2018, and there was a similar incident New Year's Eve of 2018 where migrants in Tijuana, so here you can see in the picture they're standing on Mexican soil, they were tear gassed and shot at as they were protesting and marching. And the government's official statement about these incidents stated that there were no children in the crowd when they shot at the crowd, and that officers were simply responding to rock throwers. And our office interviewed migrants that were present and that were tear gassed. And they actually shared that at least 1/3 of the group that were present during these both incidents were actually children. And some of them, were describing that they saw women or that they actually were carrying their very young children. Some at, like they had to be carried in their arms, or some that were very young, like 1-2-year-olds. So when the second tear gassing incident occurred, we actually were able to find the location in Playas de Tijuana, and we were able to find projectiles that were still there. So on the screen, you see a CS gas canister, which is tear gas that had not been detonated. So this was just hanging out on Mexican soil. And then we see the smoke bombs and peppered balls and some other projectiles. So we took pictures of these projectiles, and then we compiled the interviews that we conducted with those staying in shelters, and we issued this report. So in the report, we definitely used the testimonies to counteract the official statement and to begin to shift the narrative that was coming out that was directly tied to the large groups of migrants, right, from Central America that were arriving at the time. And here I want to share just a snippet of the statement that Customs and Border Protection gave. And so there you can see that they were saying that they essentially said that they were reacting in that way because people were throwing rocks at them or whatnot, and that they essentially had to protect the officers. And this is not the only time we've heard this version of the story coming from the government, right? They almost have it kind of on loop, right? And it's constantly the response that they give whenever they use excessive force or when they shoot chemical agents at anybody, essentially. So this specific report was sent to elected officials, including the California governor. And during this time, there was also discussion about sending the National Guard to the border, but they actually, at the end, were not deployed. And we do like to think that we played a small victory in that role, because we were one of the agencies that documented these incidents in this very specific way. So now I'll shift to this other report that we did that moved away from looking at the interactions of asylum seekers or folks that were trying to make their way into the US. And here we focused on looking at the ways in which minors were being treated at. And essentially, none of the minors that we interviewed for this report, like they weren't the targets of the enforcement, but it was the parents and like the children who were US citizens or legal permanent residents. They were there when the interaction happened. So during, last year, we started to hear that there was an increase in ICE presence in various communities throughout our county. And at the same time, we began to see a spike in work site raids. And after a few months of gathering all of these testimonies, we started noticing that a lot of these encounters were in fact involving minors. And there was a noticeable trend of ICE stopping parents when they were taking their kids to school specifically. And in some cases, the minors were left on the street and the parent was taken into custody. So the children had to then either walk a few blocks to either go back home or try to seek some help. In one case, we found out about that specific case because a local teacher happened to be driving by and saw the interaction. This person stopped and then was able to notify us and then make sure that the minor had the support that she needed. So for that very specific example of ICE leaving minors on the side of the street, that was a very, very clear violation of their own protocols. So we compiled all of these cases, and there were others that were very, very different, equally alarming. And we released this report on December 10th of 2019, which was International Human Rights Day. And again, we did send this report to local politicians, to senators, to just basically anybody that we thought would want to hear this information. And we do also file complaints or send somehow a copy of these reports to some of the supposed oversight agencies of Homeland Security. Even if we're not filing an official complaint, we still kind of find a way to send a copy just so they know essentially that, we are tracking all of these interactions. And this report, again, I'm a social worker, and, for this report, I really wanted to stress how traumatic these experiences really were for children, regardless of the severity of the situation. There was one little girl and her brother who the parents were sent into secondary when they were crossing the San Isidro port of entry. And by seeing that their parents and their older brother were handcuffed and they were essentially chained to one of the benches in the secondary revision area, the children were not yelled at, nothing like that. But that visual of their parents and their loved ones being detained in a way that they didn't understand, and they knew that their parents, that their family weren't criminals, that they didn't do anything wrong, that interaction that lasted not even that long, really it resulted in the parents needing to take these children to see a therapist. The kids were not sleeping well at night. They started having nightmares and so forth. So we know that if that type of interaction has that level of impact, how could being tear gassed not have an impact, right? So again, this is another reason why when we do the reports and when we do any of these analyses, we also try to add that emotional, that psychological trauma element to all of this. And then also we worked on documenting what I say is my least favorite policy, the Migrant Protection Protocols, or MPP. And for this very specific report, we actually trained volunteers to observe immigration court hearings, and myself and other staff from our office also went. And we began observing court hearings from June 2019 until January 2020. And we observed court hearings because at the time we saw that a lot of the focus was on kind of like the beginning parts of the reprocessing part of needing to come to the border. For those that were under MPP, they would come to the border, they would be reprocessed, and then they would go down to court. but we weren't hearing a lot of details about what was happening in court. So we were hearing the beginning and the end part, and we were hearing what was happening after court from our partners, partners like Espacio Migrante and others, that were able to share, this is what people told us happened in court, but we weren't able to see ourselves what was happening in court. So anyways, we were lucky that we were able to get the support to be present, and sometimes just being present, even though we could not actually speak or interact with migrants while they were in court, but sometimes just being present shows them that there are people that care, and they are here to make sure that nothing worse happens to me, right? And we were also present when the first person was placed under MPP and sent back. So it's the man in the middle. Apologies, the image is a little bit blurry, but here he was accompanied by Mexican immigration officials and Grupo Beta. And then on the right, you see the group of journalists and whatnot kind of trying to get their shot, right? And I'll quickly share that this being present for this was very powerful. For me personally, it was one of the first times where I honestly wanted to be like, I never want to work with media again, because they bombarded this man. He was so confused. He didn't know what was going on because the immigration officials didn't properly explain the entire process. So he didn't know why he was being returned back to Tijuana. So anyways, you can see he's walking out. He's starting to essentially try to understand what was happening, and then he gets bombarded by media to the point where he couldn't move, and Grupo Beta nor Mexican immigration could even get him to the vehicle that they had for him to take him to one of the shelters. So again, there's a fine line, right, from being able to ethically capture this information and wanting to make sure that this information does get to the media. But we also have to remember that these are people, and they're not animals. We can't, treat them as such. And lastly, I'll share that during this pandemic, we have been, working with the Otay Mesa Detention Resistance and Pueblos Sin Fronteras, which are two grassroots organizations that are doing an amazing job at capturing, the realities of what's happening at our local detention center, which is the Otay Mesa Detention Center. And that is where people are detained when they're in ICE custody. And this detention center, in the beginning of the pandemic, had actually the highest number of COVID positive cases. And it unfortunately experienced the first COVID-related death of somebody that was detained in ICE custody. And that person's name is Carlos Ernesto Escobar Mejia, que descansa en paz. And, we always want to make sure that we are uplifting all of these names, all of the stories, all of the pain that's caused, by these horrible and unjust policies. And through the partnership with these two organizations, we have been able to access, recorded statements of protest and solidarity from people detained inside. And through those, we have been able to learn just more, minute details about what's happening in detention and about the government's failure at protecting these very vulnerable populations during this global pandemic. And what I really love about these organizations is that they do their best to respect the agency of migrants and of immigrants that they talk to. And they don't release any statements or recordings without their permission. And it's a perfect example of how organizations and organizers can accompany those that are impacted. So tied to this topic, we are currently working on a report that captures all of the elements of ICE detention, including community and worksite raids, as well as the detention aspect in general. And we hope to have this report released by the end of August. So in about a month and a month and a half or so. And I'd say that our biggest challenge is that we are working against a system that has a lot of resources. And while the filing of complaints and writing of reports may not get us an immediate win, it's still imperative that these egregious violations get recorded and made public, regardless of how significant or insignificant one might think they are. And these stories become a lot more powerful when they are collectivized. There's so much power in collective complaints and stories. It can be transformative when those presenting the complaint or their story realize that they hold the power to make change. And documentation work, unfortunately, is often not valued as much compared to other work within the immigration advocacy realm. However, I feel that we can't change unjust policies without the stories directly from those that are impacted that accurately describe what is happening on the ground. Because at the end of the day, it's not my reality. Yes, I may study immigration policies and practices, but I'm not an immigrant myself, and I will never understand 100% what it is to be a migrant returned to Mexico under MPP, or to be undocumented and constantly having to deal with stress and uncertainty. And recognizing our own privilege and our own biases when working with folks that are directly impacted is, equally as important as collecting the stories themselves. And it's important that we remember that it's not our role to curate stories. And stories are not simply talking points. They are someone's reality. And authentic voices in narrative shifting work is about humanizing those made to appear as if they don't have power. The voiceless, the illegal, those that oppressive systems deem disposable. And through documentation, those same people become central to the story. The lions and their historians. And these stories become a lot more powerful when they are uplifted, and they can have a transformative power. It is transformative and healing to be able to name and to begin to repair the harm that has been done. And with that, I do want to remind everyone, regardless of what role you play in your community, to make sure that you give yourself space to process and decompress. This work is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And I truly believe that we cannot bring the change a lot of us desire if we don't take care of one another. And we need to continue working in solidarity. That is one of our responsibilities to all of the communities that we serve and we advocate for. So with that, now I will say thank you again. Thank you for giving me this space to be able to share just a little bit about the work that we do and my journey in doing this work. So again, I thank you all for joining. And with that, I will stop and I will lead it back to Diana or Sara. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for that presentation. Let me introduce Judy. Judith is a psychologist, activist, writer, musician, culture promoter, and healer apprentice. Judith's parents migrated from the south of Mexico, and she was born and raised in Tijuana. She has been a community activist for the past 10 years. Her work on self-care and collective care for young volunteers attending migration processes has been published by the UNAM editorial. She currently works as a cultural manager and collective care coordinator at the Shelter and Community Center, Espacio Migrante. Welcome, Judy. Bienvenida.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and everybody who's attending. So, Espacio Migrante is a shelter/community center and cultural center in Tijuana. Our approach aims to be holistic or integral. And we have everything from political incidents, legal aid, psychological aid. We have a clinic right next door who we collaborate with. And well, we also have educational programs, cultural and artistic activities. It's been very important for Espacio Migrante since its beginnings in 2012, 2015, to integrate the community, the Tijuana, San Diego community, through culture in our efforts. So we have always had festivals where we use music, dance, poetry, cinema, whatever is available to further stimulate this dialogue. And so I started working with them in September. And ever since, we've been working on this. Well, it's become a thing for us now, but it wasn't, which is Resiste Gozando, which is the program or project, we could call it that I'm going to share with you today. Okay, so Resiste Gozando would translate as resist by joy, or joy as a form of resistance. And actually, I love the name of this webinar, Reclaiming Narratives and Identities, because that's one of the things that we've come to. We weren't looking for that, but it happens. So we are kind of making it happen. So Resiste Gozando consists of using joy as a resistance strategy. How so? Well, starting from this point, that sustained structural violence exerted by the state will rid a person from her joy as a fundamental step towards domination and an exercise of power over her. So we're also reclaiming this joy as, well, a right that we'll have and something we wouldn't wish to have taken away from us. From this point of view, I called it a program or a project, but it's more like a work philosophy. I don't know how to call it really. Like I said, it just became a thing with us. So we started with first with the activities that we had before, like festivals and stuff, and making them more into a party. I was born and raised in Tijuana, so partying is part of my roots. So we brought this into a more political or social strategy, you know. So making it more like a party, having more dancing, having more of their music instead of along with the proposals that artists had here. So we introduced more of their food, and suddenly we had a whole like buffet of different dishes from different countries. And this started having an impact on the people who are living at the shelter, because they were so glad to be able to present their food to others. Food has been a big issue with them because we talk about the migrant community as a whole, but they're usually very different communities within them. And every one of them has a different background, comes from a different culture, and they're used to eating different things. So you put them all together, people from different countries in the same room, living, and now with the MPP program, unable to move forward with their migration plans, and food becomes a big issue. Like, why are we having Mexican food again? And people from Central America, they don't even like spicy food. So we started creating a menu that accommodates to all or most, and that has a space for each and every country to share their dishes. So that happened in the kitchen before, and then when it became a thing for the festivals that bring people from the outside, it brought back in them like their pride of their homeland, and they were very eager to show this to all of us, you know, and they made their best to have a really tasty meal to offer, and you could see the joy in their bodies, in their face. So that's how it started, like aiming more to a party than a festival, or both, more like integrating them. And right now, for example, they're very much into reggaeton. Reggaeton is seen as an unintellectual music here, and artists usually despise it. I say usually, like in general, some are more pretentious than others. And to have it there as part of what we're proposing, you know, let's have the rest of the night for twerking, was like, what? Twerking, really? Yeah, perreo, no? We're gonna have perreo tonight. And it did help a lot with the emotional state of the people who are living with us. Okay, so, and then beyond the parties and the festivals, we started doing these activities as a part of the regular program that we have. And some of them were done after the quarantine started. So first is the Circle of Words. The Circle of Words has become a fundamental tool for us. It consists of having a circle with everybody who's living there. We call it, well, within the community. And it's meant to be a safe space for them to express what they don't like, what they do like, what they need, and also to kind of balance more or have them be a part of the decision-making process. I noticed that we had a lot of super cool programs for them, like mindfulness, and they wouldn't attend. There was no interest. And then we had more and more proposals from people on both sides of the border. I want to work with Espacio Migrante, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. And we tried to, accommodate everyone, but the people were really not responding that much. The adults would send the kids to every program available, but they wouldn't go themselves. And so I started wondering why is there no interest? And I figured I would try having them decide what programs we accept or not, or at least have a discussion on them and, consider their opinion and not make it a vertical process where we, as if we know it all, decide what they need, what they want, and how to give it to them or how to fix it. So I said, let's make them part of the process. Let's have a more horizontal way of deciding at least the activities. And so that's how the Circle of Words started. It's been a process, gaining their trust, but it's working better every week. And from these are the new activities that have come from it. We have music therapy. You can see a picture down here at the corner. From these music therapy sessions, we have a circle of drums, a drum circle. And from this drum circle, our next step would be to feed Resistencia Migrante. And Resistencia Migrante is a cumbia band that was formed within the shelter as I came to work with them. I'll get into that later. We also have art therapy, and the girls were seeing how the adults were able to have a voice and an opinion and a vote, in the process. So they wanted that too, and they don't feel comfortable talking in front of their parents. So they asked for a circle only for girls. So now we have a circle of girls, and from that circle, other things came. We are also, right now we're working on having bachata classes because they care about dance. They love to dance. Most of them, of course, not everybody. So we're gonna have bachata now. And on Saturdays, we have karaoke. You can see here one of the karaoke nights. Pictures are bad with a reason. It's because of security. So you can't really tell who's who. I just wanted to point that out. And these policies came from like the picture that we saw earlier that was from the New York Times of this woman running with her 2 children. It did become iconic in the most infamous way. And this woman was stalked by a lot of people here because people here became very, very racist and xenophobic. So it became a security issue for them, and we have to hide them in Enclave Caracol and then like change them because, people would try to hurt them on the street. So we have this policy of not showing faces, and like this is a really, really pixelated picture that I hope you can't really see. And this is gonna happen with most pictures that have immigrants in them. Okay, so we also have, children's movie night that of course the girls came up with it. And here in the bold letters, you can see meditation, family games, circle of women, and the blog. Why are they in bold letters? Because this didn't work. Not everything we do works. And so having this process of listening to them can help us get rid of those programs that are not really having an impact. Like meditation, well, I don't know if you're familiar with all the benefits of mindfulness, They don't care. They don't care. They find it boring. It's not culturally appropriate for them. So there was only one lady that would go to the meditation classes, and because she felt pity for the person that was facilitating these meditation sessions, so I said, there's no point of having this if you don't want it. So we cut that program off. Family games, we had Sunday of family games, and then the kids said, you know what, the adults are very boring. We don't want to play with them. They don't have any ideas. Like, we would rather have a free night to play. So that happened. I proposed a circle of women. They don't want that, so we don't have it. And the blog, I've invited people to write on our blog, and some of them can't read or write. Most of them don't have computer skills, and the ones that could don't really care, so they haven't. And then there's the team. My work as a collective care coordinator includes my team. So collective care would be about taking care of a collective, in this case, the migrant community that lives with us or the team, but also taking care of each other. And it's also aiming to step away from this vertical structure of things. We are a nonprofit, so we do have a vertical structure, but we're trying to make it as much horizontal as we can. So the team has a lot of issues too, like Vanessa mentioned earlier, dealing with all these tragic stories and all these traumatic experiences causes burnout on the team. It causes secondary or vicarious, I don't know how you call it in English. In Español es trauma vicario, vicarious trauma. And when people, as members of the team, are starting to feel burnout and trauma too, it causes tension within the team. It causes conflict, and it takes away our ability to actually process successfully these conflicts that may arise. So attending the team has become as important as attending the migrant community, but it's in the bold letters because it's not really working yet. We've also tried to include a sense of flexibility, like we are working on trying solutions. We're trying solutions to see if they fit. If they don't, then we look for something else. So right now, it hasn't really worked with the team because we're always so busy. We have so much stuff to do. We're only 6 people taking care of a lot of things. But it is working a little bit. I already got them to go to group sessions with a therapist and to individual sessions. But this just barely started with COVID because other institutions offered those programs. So there's that. Resistencia Migrante. I said I would get into that later. So this is the band. So we formed Resistencia Migrante, and this guy with the green shirt, he's also a cultural manager. And the guy back here with the drums, he's in charge of the shelter. And they are both from El Salvador. The girl in the congas here, she's a friend from Guatemala, but she's been in Tijuana for a few years now. And this guy was in the bass, he's from Guatemala. This guy is also from El Salvador, and he was the leader of the band. So I was there doing my job one evening, and I started hearing music. I'm very much into music. I'm very passionate about it. And I used to play in punk bands when I was younger. And it's a really thrilling experience. You know, it's kind of addictive too. So I heard music, and I immediately jumped, and I'm like, what's going on? What you doing? And no, well, we're having this guy come over, and he's going to teach us some songs, this guy with the keyboards. And I'm like, okay, really? So what's going on? Why are you learning songs? And so they were trying to have a covers band to make some money. And then they said, but we need a bass. And I said, I happen to have a bass guitar from when I used to play. So that's how I got involved. I'm like the local token there. And we played, actually, this is the first time we played outside of Espacio Migrante. We were playing at Sacazonapan Bar, which is an iconic bar in TJ that is already closed, but we got to play there a week before they closed. And well, you can see the joy, right? That's the effect that we're looking for. And Resistencia Migrante is now gonna get more people from the drum circle. And these can all seem very superficial in a certain way. But to have these experiences really enriches their daily life, you know. To have making music gives you a thrill and sensations that you can't get in any other way. So I think it's really important that they have that too. Of course, we also have, like I said, other programs that will go into deeper problems like the legal aid or the political incidents. But we find that this, and we've seen it with COVID, this is really fundamental too. Okay, so now we're gonna get people from the drum circle. Now I don't play the bass there anymore because I'm not really a good musician, but I play the widow. I'm playing the widow here, which is the one that goes, okay. It sounds easy, but it's not as easy as it sounds, and it really makes your arm tired. So now in the circle, we have a 11-year-old girl who is awesome at the widow. She's way better than me already. And my first reaction was, oh my God, they're gonna kick me out of the band. And then I said, you know what, that's very symbolic of people being afraid of migrants taking their place or taking their jobs. And, you know, finally, I got a lot of stuff that I can do. And so I'm just gonna step back, and when she's ready, she's gonna take my place in the widow. And we're gonna have a presentation, and I think it's gonna be awesome. You're all invited. I'll keep you posted. So this is one of the works from art therapy. This is a mandala. The guy holding it is an adult. And so this has worked a lot with adults, especially adult men, because of machismo, which is very rooted in our culture, like Mexican and Central American culture. They don't really have many ways to express their feelings. And they have found that in drawing and these guided artistic activities, they can find a way to finally, you know, let it out. And especially with COVID, there's a lot of worry on the guy's side for their family back home, on everybody's side, but them especially because they were providers for their family here and their family back there, which is usually why they migrate. That and violence, you know, but one of their hopes is to be able to provide. And so they were left without a job, and they wouldn't talk about this. And this was causing tension also and conflict within the people who live there. So this was very, very helpful for them to be able, you know, to cry their sorrow. And these are all self-managed activities that came from the circle. They love to dance, so they just dance. They're not waiting for us to have it in the program. We're too slow. So they just take videos from YouTube and they play them in a little tiny cell phone. And well, they used to, now we have projectors. But okay, so they would just play it and dance to it and play. They're very playful, and it serves both as exercise and also, you know, to be in contact with this joy. Okay, they also made a praying circle. We are a non-religious place. We're a non-religious organization, but a lot of people have very strong spiritual practices. Most of them are Christian, so they made a praying circle by themselves. Also, when there was conflict, they had community mediation made by them, for them, and it worked. They actually told me we couldn't do it in your circle because you're there and you're a part of the team, even though you try to be like with us, like they didn't feel confident enough that it wouldn't have any consequences on them. They have an edible garden, you can see here. They just used whatever they had at hand to plant potatoes, tomatoes. They're asking for seeds of some African vegetables too. And this is all just, they took the initiative from gaining confidence from the circles that they could influence what's going on within the shelter. Like I said, the girls asked for the free Cipoteca Sundays. Cipoteca is a game library or a play library, but in Central America, they call the kids cipotes, so we have a Cipoteca. the girls asked for it. And also the girls, they made a protest. You can see here their signs. Oh my God. They made a protest when the adults were having issues, like, we're so sick of this gossiping and you people fighting. So they had this protest, and they organized themselves to make frozen pops. And they also organized to reclaim the bathroom, because there's supposed to be a bathroom only for them, for the girls, and the adults were using it, and they would say things, but they wouldn't take them seriously. So they organized, they came to us, and now it's theirs again, exclusively. And we're even getting donations to, make it pretty. But then we come up to the limit where we got donations, we don't have tools to actually install the shelves and stuff. So now we're working on getting tools. And the thing is that the circle is that flexible. We can talk about, like tonight we're having an emergency circle because of a violent episode that we had yesterday with someone who had just gotten in, and it's going to be about that. But it can also be about this, about the protest or whatever is in their mind. The benefits that we see from this, there's the physiological effects of being happy or having joy. It helps to boost your immune system. It helps you sleep better. It helps you have more energy. It helps with depression symptoms that a lot of them have, with anxiety. It also works as protection of their identity, because they get to program the music that they're gonna dance, And so now we're hearing Bicose, not so much Bad Bunny, or, things that are closer to their roots. And they also experiment the freedom to create, and this helps them gain more self-confidence. I can see it every week, like they more and more there to really speak their minds. We're working on that with women. Girls don't have this issue. They're very clear, and they're very strong opinions. So we're working on, don't take that away from your girls, and you women, step it up. So, and you can see that happening. Self-governance, like I said, more and more they come up with their own activities, and they just do it. Sometimes they don't even ask for authorization or anything. They know that it's okay, and they just let us know once they've done it. Like the edible garden, they just did it, and then they told me as a surprise when the plants were already a little bit bigger. And then we have the convivencia. I couldn't find a term in English to talk about what convivencia is. It's like hanging out.
I think it's como community building, maybe. Like
Thank you. So convivencia helps for social cohesion or community building. And this has become very important because a lot of the stress that they were facing was from living together and having, like I said, tensions about the cleaning roles, or who was not cleaning, and who made a face, and this kind of stuff. So we're also working on communication skills, and that's helped a lot. And now they know that they can count on each other, even though they still fight from time to time. But it's really helped to create this narrative, that we are there for each other, they are not alone, and you can count on the others that are around you. So this is a picture of them the first time that they just danced by themselves, and then with the big screen, and then they sent me the pictures. They organized this without anybody's help. This is Mother's Day. We had the whole team talking with them. It's created also like a closeness within the team and the community, which is really cool. These are the signs that they made to participate in the Women's March on March 8th, International Women's Day. So they made this. We had a circle before, of course, talking about their rights and what it means to go out on the streets and, reclaim them, and what the International Women's Day is about, how they have a special set of needs being migrant women, and how important it was that we have a group of migrant women in this march so that we can put their rights on the table too. There was one, and they made their own slogans and all. There was one that was my favorite. It said something about, I'm not your merchandise, you, can I say bad words? It's a pinche policía. That was awesome. And it's from a girl who's like really, you know, guerrera, like she's a warrior. So, and you could see all of their identity on their signs. It was a very interesting exercise. And they went to the march with their faces covered. I think it was the best group in the march for me. This is another way that we try to include art within everything we do. This is from a local artist, an illustrator. And this was for Mother's Day. The text is mine, but I'm not gonna translate it. It talks about women migrating. This was an event that we had. It was a convening in February. There were over 125 people there from 7 different countries, all from community-based organizations. And we made a huge effort to have a very rich cultural program at the end. And these are girls from San Diego, they're Mujeres en Resistencia. They do zapateado, like zapatista dance. They're awesome. And this comes to put more into this whole resiste gozando thing. So these girls are Kikiriki Coyotas. You can see them at the back, they're jaraneras. They play son jarocho. I don't have translations for that either, I'm sorry. And they also dance sometimes. And this was awesome. And you can just see, like, this really, it's contagious, you know? Everybody was dancing with them. This is a nice picture of them on the stage, but everybody was like jumping around and chanting. And after this, they made with their, I don't know if you can see a wooden box over here. They made a beat for another rapper, a local girl, and it was just so inspiring. And we also have this like feminist side put to all of this. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Un Violador en Tu Camino. It became a feminist hymno. It was from Las Tesis in Chile. And so it was like very global. We had this in that convening too, by the beach. We had a Mayan ceremony. It was really beautiful. We had this artivism and migration panel. And you can see here, Ebony Bailey, she's a Blaxican cinematographer. This guy sings in a pretty famous band. And this girl from Las Banderas, Josh Kuhn, who's an author, Aide Jimenez, who's also in the Tijuana, San Diego area, working with migrants and art. From Café Tacuba, this guy. And this was the convening that we had. Here you can see another activity in the Espacio Migrante. We, like I said, ever since they started, they've had this focus on art and culture. We have this photography exposition, and you can see here some products that this Blaxican girl from DF brought. Here's the food that I'm always so happy about. This time we had mojitos, which are an alcoholic drink with rum, but that didn't work. So we don't have alcohol anymore. Like I said, we're trying solutions. These guys from Cuba also had a salsa workshop. It was also very cool. And this is the food that they were sharing. I wanted to use a close so you can like really see why we are so happy to share this. And this is people dancing after that salsa class that I mentioned earlier. This guy here lived at the shelter, and this woman, she's actually mom of one of my friends here in Tijuana. So everybody's just dancing with everybody. I remember that night I was asking some friends for a favor, which is rare, and they said no, and this like really bumped me, and I was pretty upset. And I remember I was just like sitting in a corner, like feeling sorry for myself. And And then I said, wait, didn't you say resiste gozando or something? Like, why the hell are you in the corner, you know? So I just got up and started dancing. And you know what? It really does help. It really does lift your spirits. This, again, is the local artist that we saw earlier. She helped us do this flyer for the Black Lives Matter protest. Because I also wanted to mention that we do have a very strong focus on women, children. We try to have an intersectional approach. So giving like the central stage to Black women was very important, you know, for all the people involved in organizing this. Here you can see Resiste Gozando has become a thing for us. In this protest, this woman right here who's raising her fist, she was just dancing. We had like 5-6 minutes of African dance. And it was, of course, you know, Black Lives Matter is also it comes from very traumatic experiences, and it can be very emotionally draining, but we also, you know, resort to art and dance to make it more bearable, I guess. What I mentioned earlier, that when a state is exerting sustained violence, this comes from reading stuff like Deleuze and Foucault and stuff like that, and that I had to make papers and stuff. But all of this doesn't really come from academic papers. It's more from very human experiences. So I know this is my Resiste Gozando shirt. I made it myself. And you can see the A there is an A for anarchy. And it comes from, well, like I said, I come from the punk scene, and we had this anarcho-feminist collective called Tarantela. And Tarantela, you can see us here before a concert. It comes from friendship, really, and from being there for each other. And one of my friends who makes these cute little drawings, she proposed, you know, let's all of us get together. We're all feminists. This was like 8 years ago. Like, we're all feminists. Let's get together and talk about what this means for us. And so we did. And then she said, we should look forwards to healing ourselves from all of this violence that we received from the patriarchy. And I said, oh, that would be cool. Since they knew that I was a psychologist, they looked at me and I'm like, I don't do that with friends. And so the other proposal was, let's dance. Tarantella is a dance from the north of Italy. And when people were bitten by a tarantula, they would call a band and they would play live for like 2 or 3 days, because if you dance enough, you sweat enough, and you sweat the poison. That was the belief. So they had this huge party. Tarantella is a very upbeat music. And some women would pretend that a tarantula bit them, that a tarantula bit them, so that they could have a party, so that they could rest from being in charge of, you know, the kitchen, the house, the kids, and all of this, and, you know, to get away from the oppression of patriarchy. And they would have their dance. So it was a liberation dance for them. And this is how we were able to access these healing practices through dance. And that's really the precedent. That's where it comes from, this whole thing. It's not really from reading guys with French last names. So with this, I would end my presentation. We aim to heal, resist, and enrich a cultural dialogue that nourishes us all. Because we've learned to see ourselves as part of this community that is looking to heal and aiming, you know, to resist. This system is hard on us too. So, and when we say cultural dialogue, it's because we take from them also, you know, we share stuff. It's a two-way or many ways street. We're not just there to give, we're also there to receive and heal ourselves. So this is like the purpose of the whole thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith. I wanted to thank both of you for your presentations and just sharing the beautiful work that you are doing. I know that actually, Judith, I've had the pleasure of attending many of the events put on by Espacio Migrante. I know Ebony Bailey is one of my friends as well, the filmmaker you mentioned. So I do think that it's beautiful and powerful. I know for me as a resident of the region to have your work presented. And I also think that it really does embody sort of the spirit of this event, the intersections of how art and law can work together and need to work together. I know, Vanessa, you talked about the power of storytelling and witnessing and reporting and how that has been able to impact at least the way that people remember and understand these historic moments, like that iconic photo that you shared. I know that, living here in Tijuana, there was, media from London, from Japan. There was like reporters here from all parts of the world documenting that day. And so I think your work really speaks to, and the work that you all do at American Friends Service Committee is so important. But I know a lot of the speakers in our symposium have mentioned and named the difficulty that it is to do this work against systems that are exponentially funded so much more than a lot of the community organizations doing the work of resistance. So I guess I wanted to open with a question for you, and then I have a few comments and questions for you, Judith, as well. Vanessa, what are some of the impacts of the reports?
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, I feel like all of this type of work, regardless of what it looks like, it all helps to, increase the awareness of these issues in different ways, right? Because the people just like our communities at large are super diverse, right? So some people might not be into reading the reports that we put out, right? But they might be more drawn to work like Espacio Migrante because it's more artistic, it's more vibrant in that way, right? But they're still pushing out the same message, right? So I feel like all the work that everybody is doing at the end of the day is still increasing awareness. And that's still very, very important, right? For us to not forget that. But I would say that for me, at least, one of the biggest impacts, and something that I didn't share, was that we've been able to see, a lot of the work that we do is also around what we call base building and accompaniment, right? So that's just another way to say community organizing. So it's really, really powerful when you can walk alongside somebody from day one, from the day that they were arrested by ICE because their job got raided and whatever. And we do accompany community members like that closely, and we work with them until they do not want our support, right? So in many cases, those are the people that we are giving media trainings to, that we are including their testimonies in these reports, and they are doing media interviews and they're posting on their social media. They're going through their own process. And for me, I feel like, again, that's work that's a little bit more difficult to highlight, right? And to uplift, because you want to be very mindful of the people that are doing that work, right? We don't want to kind of just put everybody on display like that. Anyways, but I feel like it's when you see somebody, say a year later or a few months later, and you're like, wow, now I met you when you, again, the day after ICE, I can say almost maybe ruined your life at that moment, right? Because now you don't have a job, you're trying to figure out how you and your family are going to survive. And fast forward, now you've gone to DC, you've gone to Sacramento, you're advocating for yourself. Now you are finding the voice that was always within you. Right? I don't like using the word empower. I don't like when organizations say this work empowers, we help to empower. We're not empowering. People are already empowered. We're simply kind of helping them see that they have that power and that light, within themselves. And we're just giving them tools, right? Tools. And we're saying this is all of the stuff that you can do, and you can advocate and push for whatever it is that you want to push. We can help you get there, And so that's also part of I think the impact that these reports have when we share with them, because we have various like regular meetings with the community members that we help support, and then we update them. We're like, this is what we're doing, this is how we're using kind of the stories that you all shared or whatever it is, and you know, we check in with them first. And I think that also adds like another level of value, right? And I guess empowerment, even though I don't like that word. So I think that's just kind of the other part of the other element of like the impact of reports and like documentation work that's a little bit maybe more difficult to like capture and like share. How do we share that with like everybody else? Because it's more of a personal journey for the people that are directly involved. But yeah, so I love seeing that. And we definitely accompany like so many people, and yeah, it's like a lovely feeling. I feel like that's my favorite part.
Yeah, definitely. And I know just what you mentioned, just the simultaneity. I think we've had a lot of speakers that are sort of responding to the different moments, you know, that folks that are arriving to Tijuana from many other borders are facing. So I think that, you know, like you mentioned, it's all important, all sort of happening at the same time, or in these ways that they're in relationship and in dialogue with one another. So I wanted to ask a question to Judy. I wanted to share and just say, I think that one of the things that I admire most about Espacio Migrante, also just because I've had the privilege to just attend some of the events that you all do, is really what you mentioned, like centering the folks that are living at Espacio Migrante, where they're leading events and they're running the programming aspects. I think that has been so powerful, not only for the organization, but just for Tijuana. I mean, I know that a big part of the integration process has been using art as a vehicle to create visibility. So I guess the question that I had for you was, and I know you spoke to some of this, I think it was powerful that you shared about how folks really just own the space, it sounds like. Obviously, like, Espacio Migrante is a shelter, so people are living there. But I think it's so amazing to hear that folks are like, cool, like, this is our home. I mean, to me, that's what I am hearing from what you present. So what are maybe some ways that, I know Espacio Migrante has received a lot of attention, just like international people have come to see the space. What are some ways that maybe folks can support? Because I do think there's also this balance of you all listening, like you said, to the community. So what are ways that folks can support? I heard you also say staff. Understaffing is always like an issue with your ability to hold that space. So maybe what are some ways that people can support Espacio Migrante and that work that you all are doing?
Well, definitely donating is always a great option. Right now we're working on a program that helps people that are not living, because we closed our doors. There's nobody coming in anymore. So we're helping people outside. We're not accepting people where they're going to have to go through a 2-week process. It's going to be very slow. So we're helping them pay rent and groceries. And we have a GoFundMe for this. And you can also follow us on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter. Just look for Espacio Migrante. It's going to pop. And like right now, we really need a toolbox with tools to be able to have these repairs that we need for the bathroom and stuff. And there are many ways to get involved also with the educational or artistic programs. You can, send us an email, write to the Facebook page. And if you have any ideas, we're always welcome to hear new proposals.
Thank you, Judy. How can immigrant, migrant, and refugee communities participate in the process of documentation and human rights observation alongside advocates?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there's different ways, right? But I mean, we get our information from community members, right? So that automatically is kind of, they're starting to engage in that process simply by, sharing their experiences and, being open to filing the complaints and kind of working with us through that process. That's obviously one way. But to prepare oneself or communities to become, just to know how to document, I should say. There's a few different organizations that provide really good trainings. One that we presented on some panel not that long ago, but the organization is called Witness, eyewitness, So they do really amazing trainings and they have amazing resources on their website, but they also do training where they show community members how to use their cell phone to properly document. So they go through everything, you should avoid X, Y, and Z. You should make sure that you do this, that you do that. You want to stay safe. So they go through all of the video documenting process that can very easily be like applied to like how do you document ICE or Border Patrol presence in your community, right? It's the same tools. So they do, and that's one that I definitely recommend to people to look up their resources. We can help put folks in contact with them if you all want to. Our organization also does like what we call human rights observer trainings. And that covers some of the video documentation process, parts of that like Witness covers. But then we also talk about like, how do you, if you're going to physically be present, like what can you do? Like you should, for example, take a note of like the time, the location. If you're going to send us pictures, we get a lot of pictures from people saying, I saw ICE or I saw Border Patrol. And they just send a picture and then we can't really do much with that, right? So it's like knowing like, okay, we know we would need obviously the exact location, the time of day, like we inform people of like the type of cars they should look out for, right? ICE uses very specific unmarked cars. We have pictures of actually almost all of the cars here in the local San Diego ICE that ICE uses. So we train people on like these like very tangible tips, right? that will help people become better at documenting what's happening in their community. And then of course, knowing where to refer people. Something we hear quite often from community members is they say, this happened to my neighbor, this happened to my friend, my loved one. And then so they're trying to like document and share what happened with the situation. But then they're also sometimes struggling with like how to properly, like where to refer people, like, like for support services or legal services or whatever. So for me, like the documentation is like pretty holistic, right? There's like responding, like almost like the rapid response part. Then there's kind of like the report, the filing complaints, whatever. And then there's like dealing with the actual people, right? Like they are scared, they are impacted in which way. So being able to kind of, those are the tools that we share with community members. So they have same knowledge that we have. For me, that's also, and for all of us in our office, that's very important. We shouldn't be hoarding this information, right? It's not private information. Like we should be sharing as much information and resources with everybody. So when we do the trainings, we do also kind of go over that and we'll do like a general overview of immigration enforcement. That's probably like the best answer I can give right now, because there's a lot, I think, that goes into documentation work. But I mean, it's like almost like an easier-ish way for community members maybe to feel like they are doing something, and documenting, like we said, is super powerful, right? So anyways, people are more than welcome to reach out and then we can help put together any of those trainings.
Thank you, Vanessa. And so we'll close with this question for Judith. The question here is, the Resiste Gozando strategy is clearly a very powerful tool. It's really wonderful to see how it's been implemented and continues to develop at Espacio Migrante. How might Resiste Gozando be able to spread outside the Espacio Migrante into other places and communities in Tijuana, migrant or otherwise?
Okay, so this could be a first step. Now we're talking about it with people in San Diego. You can maybe go to the events or be there, but we don't really talk about, oh, we're doing this from this perspective and this philosophy, blah, blah. So now we're doing that here, and that can work. Like I said, like the circle, it's a very flexible exercise because the content of it is always changing, and the way we can do this is also always changing. And the way this came to be came from the bottom up, like the Zapatistas say, like build what you can with what you have at hand. There is no manual. It's not coming from up down. It's more of a conscious exercise, to see what resources the world around you is offering, or the world within, what can you bring? And like, I can't play the bass, but I can have the widow. And so it depends on what's around you. And I think it's going, if it spreads, it's going to spread organically like that, with the people who are interested and can do something about it. And then that's going to bring other people in and so on and so forth. And I think that takes also on the question by Brandy, how can you do it from Fresno? Well, that way, who's there? What do they do? Do you have artists in that migrant community? What can they bring to the table? And also, how do artists get involved without falling into extractivism, without like just using their experiences to forward their career? It's also very important to have a very ethical practice and always leave something for the community that you're basing your art on, because we see this a lot, especially with documentalists. I mean, I understand that there's a practice of doing a document and having a social intervention is very different, but please consider, collaborating in a way. It can't be just the making of your product, because then you just leave people there with all the same, and they think this is going to have an impact, and you don't really know. So just leaving something for the community, I think, is a very important. Academics do this too a lot. They just go there, they make their research, they get grants and stuff, and of course this might have an impact someday in maybe, I don't know, migrant policies or whatever, but please also consider doing something in the present with the community that you're working with, and not just, extracting from them.
Thank you, Judy. And I think sort of your presentation and this concept is a beautiful way to close the symposium, which I hope in some ways, I think, has been able to bring a reminder of that joy. I think that we've had a lot of discussion around the backdrop of the pandemic and also this political moment that we are living in, not only in our region, but in our nation. And I know other panelists have talked about globally also how our contexts are interconnected, and how, as you mentioned, Judith and Vanessa, like the migrants that are arriving here are not just from, the border right next to us. They're not just from Mexico. I think it's been important to remember that, but I think what a beautiful way to close this symposium with this idea of the joy of resistance, because I think that in a lot of the presentations, we're able to name sort of these injustices that work to systematically perpetuate pain, whether that's what these systems think or believe they're doing or not. And so I think that it's, super powerful to remember that and to kind of, anyone that's listening or will listen to this video later, to remember that in this work, I think how joy is also a form of resistance and a form of power. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists from tonight and from all the other 5 to 6 webinars that we've hosted. Today's the 6th, but the other 5 as well. I think the conversation has been amazing and powerful, and we're hoping that next year we can even expand this symposium to both sides of the border. I know that before this happened, we were looking into that option, and to even definitely kind of highlight what you're saying, Judy, to have the folks that we're talking about in these panels in maybe a more academic or legal context be the ones to share and to come. So I know that the border's definitely been a limitation for us to be able to do that in a way that's meaningful and equal in terms of the programming that can happen on both sides. So we look forward to next year, to you all being a part of the conversation, for those watching as well. And we'll close with some words from our Executive Director, Alma Robinson.
Thank you for joining our 2nd annual symposium, Intersections, Art and Law at the Border. My name is Alma Robinson, and I'm the Executive Director of California Lawyers for the Arts. The COVID-19 pandemic provided us with an opportunity to reframe this symposium as a series of virtual programs. These will all be posted on our YouTube channel, along with other useful art law webinars. Many thanks to the San Diego Commission for Arts and Culture, the California Arts Council, the law firm of Perkins Coie, and other members of California Lawyers for the Arts for making this program possible. Thanks also to our San Diego Steering Committee, to the speakers for their excellent presentations, and our staff in Southern California for the many hours they dedicated to producing this series. If you have specific legal questions, please contact our lawyer referral service for assistance. We also offer a range of alternative dispute resolution services and an ongoing schedule of educational programs on various legal and business topics. I hope that you've enjoyed tonight's program and encourage you to browse our website for future programs and other information, including a list of COVID-related relief resources. Please consider joining CLA in order to help support our work as we advocate for the arts as an essential sector of our society. Thank you for your participation.
So once again, many thanks to all of you who joined us tonight, and for any of the other panels in this series, for those of you that were with us last year. But we thank you, and please reach out to California Lawyers for the Arts as a resource to your artistic and legal needs. And also for those that inhabit this region, let us know what you're needing in terms of programming and what other things we can present. Thank you so much.